Welcome back to Tiny Grimes Games, and I'm here another Star Wars Destiny video, and it's happened. The new holocron, the new RRG, the new tournament rules are out, and as I hoped, it is indeed a light touch. There's really only two changes that I think are worth even talking about. The first one being Maul's lightsaber now having the additional text of, if you want to use this power action, it's going to cost you a resource. This is kind of a big change. It takes Maul's lightsaber from being the single best weapon in the game to being the best weapon in the game. Probably not quite the best. It kind of now is a little more deck dependent. The heirloom lightsaber might just be flat out better now. But it definitely puts Maul's lightsaber in a category of still very, very good, but quite cost intensive. Like, if your goal was to use it turn one with its power ability or power action, now that's a 4 cost deal that you have to come up with. Instead of just getting 1 extra resource off of an enrage or something, you have to find a way to come up with 2. So I think what it's going to do is make Maul's lightsaber more reasonable. It's going to take away the turn 1 kill a guy. It's going to take maybe a little bit longer for the 1-turn kill deck to go off, as it has to amass a little bit of resources. Now, in fact, hitting the 1-turn kill with disruption can be even more powerful. For them to be able to do something like boundless into a Maul saber turn is going to take 2 instead of 1 before. If you can take away their only resource showing, now they have to come up with 2. It could make things a little bit more difficult. The bigger one, of course, though, is running interference. Running interference now has the text, when it's used, set it aside. Does this mean it's a dead card? I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because on the one hand, you can still do really amazing things with it. You can still play that and play Never Tell Me the Odds. You play Concentrate, Alter off of it. But I think maybe the better way to do that is just going to be off something like a Force Speed or any of the other, a million ways to cheat. I think that's probably going to be better. Running interference seemed to be more based on messing with your opponent's tempo, messing with their choices, really making it difficult for your opponent, and then being able to go with the smackdown on the unpreventable damage, much more so than just like a one-off usage. So I personally will not be running any decks that run interference with this new errata. To me, this is a dead card. I'll be very curious to see if people disagree, though, and say, no, I think Sabine Ezra or Obi-Wan Maz is just as good with running interference. It's going to be interesting to me to see what they do. I think it's dead. I didn't think it was that great to start with. Like, the card was great, but I just wasn't that enamored with any of those, basically one character decks. I hope the guy doesn't die or Maz has to somehow win by herself. That doesn't intrigue me all that much, so I'm not too sad to see it get hit. What I am a bit worried about is this. If the aggro decks all got hit, and let's think about this. The Sabine Ezra got hit. Obi-Wan Maz got hit. Basically, Boba 7's sister got hit. Maybe not as hard as it could have been, but Maul Saber was definitely a good card in that deck. If all of these aggro decks get hit, and none of the slow decks, none of the mill decks, none of the vehicle decks got hit in any way, are we going to end up with a slightly skewed meta now towards those types of decks, because those more aggressive decks have all got hit, and some of them are completely unplayable? What are we left with? That's what is very intriguing to me, and I don't know the answer yet. I would definitely agree that the Ayla decks are going to become more prevalent. I think Ayla Rey becomes better. I played quite a bit of Ayla Yoda Padawan, which I thought was fantastic. These decks all become great, but they're kind of more mid-rangey decks. And will that give something like the Vehicles deck enough time to set up, or will it give the Mill deck enough of a go to be able to get that one more turn than it needed to be able to win? I'm really curious to see. If I was going to Worlds, I know I would jump right on these later game dirtlier decks and see if I could find a way to hold off the mid-range decks decks, knowing that the super aggro decks probably are not going to be as prevalent. It's going to be really interesting. So I think these two really small shakeups might have a pretty big impact on the meta, actually. Losing aggro decks, and I really didn't like the one-turn kill deck that much before. I feel like Scruffy Nerf Herders, Philps, Close Quarters Assault, all these cards were really bad for it anyway. And now needing one more dollar to make that Lightsaber work, I don't know. I think it sets up terms where your opponent can disrupt them even more easily than before. I just don't feel like that deck is going to be as prevalent. It wasn't that prevalent to start with. It's more of a, like, take advantage of unsuspecting people kind of deck. So if we lose that deck and we lose the aggro decks, this is a pretty big change. I think people aren't really noticing this as much. They're looking at this list and going, oh, it's only 2 cards, big deal. It's fine. The Maul Saber's still great, and oh well, everyone hated running interference and it wasn't winning events anyway. But I really think this could have a profound effect on the meta, and I'm really, really curious to see what innovative deck builders come up with, knowing that Worlds is right around the corner. People are going to be serious now, testing, trying to figure out the meta, and I have a feeling we're going to see a whole lot of Ayla and Worlds, whether that is something like Ayla Ray, anything with profitable connections, essentially, in Ayla. Ayla vehicles. I think we're going to see a lot of Ayla that we may regret not seeing her at +1. I know a lot of people out there are rejoicing. I'm fine, whatever. If FFG thinks this is going to lead to a balanced meta, I'm fine with it. I certainly agree with their decision that Maul Saber and running interference were unbalanced or annoying depending on the card. But we'll see. Does it have a profoundly negative effect on what was an awesome meta? Let me know what you think. Are you worried? Are you thrilled? Do you think these slower decks are going to take over? What's going on? And remember, there is a subscriber giveaway at 10,000 subscribers. So go ahead, like the channel, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, and I'll see you next time on Tiny Grimes Games.